Well, hello and good evening to you. How are you, folks? It is good to see you, and it is good to be seen by you. I, of course, am the one and only, your humble servant, Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver. Welcome to the live stream, everyone. And we have got a humdinger for you tonight because we have not only one guest, but we have two guests on the show tonight. Tracy reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and he said, man, I'm working with Shattermare Comics on something. I don't want to give away too much, guys, okay? Oh no, is my audio flat again? I see lots of people saying, no, we're good. Okay. But anyway, so yeah, Shattermare Comics. Tracy's been working with him, and he said, you gotta have Cody on the show. And I said, let's make it happen. So that we've got him coming on in a few minutes. That's very cool. If you've just come by, like if you're not sure what this is, if you've subscribed but you haven't seen a live stream before, and by the way, we're at 4981. We're just 19 subs away now from 5,000 subscriptions here on the show, and I'm pretty excited about that because when we hit 5,000, that will be a larger number. But if you're not sure what it is, we do 5 nights a week, folks. We bring you guys some classic TTRPG live streaming fun. We talk to creators sometimes. We live stream games for you sometimes. We do deep dives on great products. We teach you guys how to play classic tabletop RPGs if you're so inclined. So thank you one and all for stopping by. And if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications, give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and leave a comment down below and tell us what you liked about it, and I'll do more of it. But this live stream, like all others before it, is brought to you by our friends at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde makes the kind of adventures they'd like to play. Whether it's for Castles and Crusades 5th edition or the OSR, old school is in play at the table with Hellebarde Games, and you can find them on DriveThruRPG or on their website, hellebardegames.com. Check out that Temple of the Sun module. I'm told it's a pretty good one. But anyway, speaking of modules, Vaughn, thank you for the shout out there. Dropped the latest adventure module. That's something I like to give out to our patrons and our YouTube membership supporters at the $10 level, either on Patreon or via YouTube membership. You can receive a free, it's not free, it's in exchange for your support. First edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons module every month, penned by myself. Kyle did I think Kyle did September. Black Mountain Delve. It's a fun module. You guys should definitely check that out. October's went out last night, just in time for Halloween, a little something for your trick-or-treat bag. And we've got one coming in November, and then December and January, and so on, and etc. So if you want to jump on now, if you want to jump in now, so you get November's, December's, January's, blah, 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 on, you can click the membership button over here, or you can join us over on Patreon. So thank you to those folks who've elected to do that. So anyway, let's just get right into it. I'm going to welcome our guests, and of course, this guy. He is a pioneer of Dungeons & Dragons. This gentleman was there when D&D was born. He is one of the fathers of Dungeons & Dragons. Everybody say hello to Tracy Lesch. Tracy, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I cannot complain, sir. It's good to see you. Welcome to the show. And as I was telling everyone, of course, you brought some company tonight. So let's go ahead and without further ado, welcome Bryan from Shattermare Comics. Hello, Bryan. Thank you for coming on the show this evening. Thank both of you for coming on the show. Now, we'll get to the nuts and bolts of this, but for those of you out there in the audience who may not know, first of all, there's a link to Shattermare Comics in the description of the video. You can go check out their website. But what you guys have got going on, like one of your flagship titles, can I call it a flagship title, is a comic based on your tabletop adventures. Am I right? Brian? Did I lose you guys?
Did we lose Bryan?
Did we lose Brian? I didn't do it this time, guys. My hands were nowhere near the mute button. Brian, are you back to us, bud? We're having a little bit of audio impact from Brian there. So Tracy, why don't you go ahead and when Brian's able to rectify his audio, tell us about getting to know the Shattermare guys and what you've been doing with them.
Okay, well, a lot of this I definitely want Bryan to break, because I think he's got something in mind. But I met Bryan at the first Orlando QuestCon, which I think you were there as well. And
yes,
there he is.
There, 5x5. Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Could you
squeaky chair and my mic got pulled out of the.
Oh no! Oh no!
Don't.
Yeah, I get it. I've got a rat's nest down by my feet here with the streaming PC. I have to be super careful, or else show's over. But anyway, so Tracy, you were saying you and Bryan met at QuestCon, which I was at. I was just hanging out at Tracy's table for the con. So,
well, you gave a presentation as well, though. Did you know?
Yeah, all 5 people that attended it. So
there you go.
Hey, well, you have always said if there was even one person.
Fair enough. Hoisted on my own card. At any rate, please, either one of you young men want to jump in and just Tracy. So QuestCon, you meet Bryan, and
yeah, I'm going to give the floor to Bryan.
Sure. Yeah. So we were talking at the show, and turns out that Tracy is a legend, a god among Dungeons and Dragons artists and people in the community.
Yes.
I mean, you invented creatures that I'm dealing with right now in Baldur's Gate 3. So it's impressive to me. I fangirled out a little, but so yeah, we got to talking, and I have the comic book Hardly Heroes. So I figured it'd be great to have an original artist who worked on Dungeons and Dragons to see if we could do a cover for our book. And Tracy was excited to do it, and so that's how we met and started our professional relationship. And now it's just fun to hang out and talk about current Dungeons and Dragons, all kinds of nerd culture kind of stuff.
Love it.
So
for sure. And so tell Bill, so elaborate on the Hardly Heroes, because that's like the escapades of your actual group.
Yeah, so it's a pretty direct adaptation of my group's long-running campaign. So we tried to make it as close as possible. It doesn't really break the fourth wall. I mean, there's some, like, the characters don't exactly talk, like people from a like Game of Thrones, but it's pretty much true to the story of that our original DM started. So my friends started the campaign with a guy named Wilson. It kind of started on sad terms. So he was diagnosed with cancer. It was his dream to always start a D&D game and run a campaign, so he did with the guys. And unfortunately he passed away, and one of the players at the time stepped up and became the DM, and so they continued through campaign 1. I joined the group, I believe, about a year into it, so right when they wrapped up campaign 1 and we started campaign 2. But we have all the original notes, and so we're starting from the very beginning of the campaign, and we're going to do it, as long as as long as we can. So we'll see. We'll see if it's like more like an Invincible Saga kind of run, or like a Spawn, where we get to like 300 issues or so. So
Right on.
But yeah, so it's an adaptation. It's got all the original characters. Luckily, it was a homebrew campaign, so not too much to deal with. We do a couple of name changes, on towns and cities. But
yeah, that's one of those things. I mean, I think probably I would dare say there's probably some high percentage of people that would love to turn their campaign into a saleable property of some kind.
mhm.
But I mean, like the Monday night game Tracy's been in now for years and years and years. It's all set in Greyhawk. I could spin a fantastic story that people would just eat up with a spoon, but I can't make a dime off of it because it's all Greyhawk, right? Wizards would park the Death Star over my house.
Right, they would show up, especially with the that OGL,
Oh,
that update they were trying to roll out with everybody, where they
madness.
could retroactively come after you.
See,
Yeah.
that proves that they would
Great.
screw up the plans for the Death Star.
Right.
Yeah.
It would fall. It already fell into the hands of the rebels, with Cobalt Press.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you could just, you could change the names, the places, but the story is still, if it's still true to the story, the game that you guys are running, then you could publish that in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. Well,
So-
that brings us to an interesting question. As you found yourself poised on the cusp of this, first of all, so when did Hardly Heroes begin? When was the inception?
Oh man, about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. So we're on campaign 3. The book picks up at the beginning of 1. So yeah, I'd say like 2017, 18, I guess, when the group originally formed, and then I joined a year or so later. We were probably about a year or 2 in, and we came to the same conclusion. Man, this would be a fun story to tell. How we should do something with this. What should we do? And that was a little after Critical Role had become pretty big, and a lot of the people doing all kinds of content, animated content, online content. And one of the guys in the group, Gabe, he's been reading comics since he could read. That's basically how he learned to read. So he just came out with the idea, well, why don't we just put it into a comic book? And the rest of us, not being super familiar with the comic book industry and how books are made, we're like, of course, why not? That's a perfect way to encapsulate this. So that's kind of how we set up about going Critical Who. So then we took ourselves to the task of developing it. We started on the comic in 2020. So around the time of COVID, we were all home a lot more often. I was working at home at that point, so we were able to do a lot more. We could, early on we couldn't meet that much, but luckily in Florida, people were pretty much out and about after a couple months. So we were working on the comic. 2021 was our first convention, and we were starting to take pre-orders. And we hadn't launched the book yet, but we got pretty good pre-order sales. And then in February 2022, last year, we launched it. So that's kind of the timeline of the book, and we've been going pretty strong ever since. Ran into a couple of hurdles, like with artists and stuff, but
Well,
Still
Yeah,
are.
those artists, man, you got to watch out for them. They'll flake on you.
I
You know?
know, divas.
So hard to deal with. I swear. Sometimes I'm thankful for AI at this point. Honestly, just replace them.
Man.
Get them out of here. Oh,
Some
not
of them
you,
are.
Tracy. No, you're
Some
one
of
of
them are
the good
okay.
ones.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
not
okay.
Tracy's one of the good ones. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can tell you some horror stories for sure.
But but all kidding aside, did you feel like did you guys like maybe sit down and talk about, because you're not at least not currently putting out any gameable product. It's all the other way around. It's tabletop into comics. You haven't have you had any thoughts about, hey, maybe other people would like to play our campaign, A, and B, with everything that blew up back in January with the open gaming license, did that impact those plans at all?
Yeah, they actually did, because we had the idea right before, maybe like 2 months before all of the debacle with Wizards. We decided, hey, why don't we, just because of feedback we were getting from people, it was just an obvious, hey, you guys have a comic book based on your D&D campaign. Why don't you come out with a module or publish like this world as a campaign setting? So we started working on that. And I remember we were on a show, a podcast, and we were talking about that exact thing. And I didn't go into too much detail, but we had basically put that on hold because we weren't sure what was going to happen. So we are working on a module. In fact, in about 2 weeks from now, there's a show that a buddy of mine is involved in running called Free Play, Free Play Florida. I'll give a shout out to Graven. That's a cool one where they've got a lot of retro games. So people bring like pinball machines, arcade games, and then a lot.
I've always wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now you got to drive farther back. It's not in your backyard anymore.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So they do indie game developers, board games, tabletop, card games. So we'll be there. Running kind of like a beta test version of the module. It's going to line up with the first volume, which is the first 6 issues. So now that the Wizards thing has kind of died down a little, they've walked back, I think, most of what they were trying to do. I haven't kept up too much with it, but we're a little more confident now, because I guess worst case scenario, we have to make sure we're true to whatever the cutoff is of the OGL they had before they were going to privatize everything, or I would convert it to like a Pathfinder module or something,
Yeah. I mean, and it's, anymore at this point, let me just say emphatically to both my guests and anyone in the audience, what I'm about to say does not constitute legal advice. So I say just do your thing. Just do your thing. Is Wizards really going to punch themselves in the face again by going after an indie publisher? I honestly don't think so. I could be wrong,
right?
But anyway, so you guys, you've had this comic. You're talking about you're talking about making it gameable, which is very exciting. Tell us a little bit about the genesis, like you coming to tabletop gaming. Like what was what was your first D&D? What was it like?
Oh man, yeah, I've been playing since I was about 15, so I'm 32 now. So I started right on I actually looked this up the other day, like the end or the cusp of 3.5 from 3.0. And yeah, as soon as I picked up that first player's handbook, man, I was hooked. That was it. I would just sit. I didn't have a ton of people to game with, but I would just sit there and like make up, like imaginary practice characters, whatever you call it, just like reading through all the source material. There's some pretty good game stores, especially back in the day here in Jacksonville. So I would just go hang out, and eventually found a pickup group, and I was just the annoying, teenager in their group, probably to them. But man, I loved it. So yeah, and then it just kept going from there. I mean, I've been getting in and out of groups since then. When they had, I will say I've never played 4th edition. I heard that one was awful. I went from 3.5 to Pathfinder 1st edition, which everyone called 3.75.
Right. Yeah.
It was just kind of like a reset of 3.5.
Yeah.
And then 5th edition was, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I would like to go back at some point and play, AD&D or the original.
You don't say.
Yeah,
I've been around here a little bit every once in a blue moon. We've been
like a winky dink.
Could maybe make that happen. Yeah,
possibly, maybe.
Possibly. I hear you know some guys.
I know a guy.
You know a guy.
I know a guy. Yeah, and I can't believe, Brian, that you and I have actually not run into each other. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers in 2024 I can do some stuff down at Gods and Monsters again, but their landlord took away everything but like a foot depth on the front of their store.
Right.
Did you ever go there as I alienate the entire audience by having a private conversation on stream? But Brian, did you ever get down to Gods and Monsters?
I have never been to the version like in the glory days of Gods and Monsters.
I was telling him about it.
Yeah, I have. I've met the owners. They're great people. I've been down there. We've done a signing there, but it's in the newest plaza that they're in.
Yeah, the vestibule.
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird.
Their first landlord. I got to tell this story. I apologize. Hey, folks out there in the audience, when you come to Orlando, go to Gods and Monsters. That's an unsolicited, unpaid for endorsement. Go to Gods and Monsters. It's awesome. Todd and Anna are awesome people. It is a fantastic store. And yes, they do sell old school Dungeons and Dragons stuff when they get it in. They usually call me and ask me to evaluate it for them. I'm like that guy on when you watch Pawn Stars. I know a guy. Well, I'm that guy. But anyway, so they moved into this place and they had a great landlord, and he was like, oh yeah, you guys can put all your arcade games in the vestibule, and when you have events you can have them out in the vestibule, and so on and etc. And I don't know if it's a new landlord or if this guy went Jekyll and Hyde, but he's like putting up the seat belt cloth kind of bank barriers that they put up to keep you in line at theaters and everything like that, like roping that whole thing off. So, and they're like, you can have as wide as your store and 2 feet out, and that's it.
Yeah, that sucks, because there's also a lot of space in there. It's kind of weird because they're tucked inside of a building. It's almost like a mini mall, but with like 3 stores.
Yeah, and I used to go do free RPG days events.
Oh, cool.
And they gave me as many tables and as much space as I wanted out in the vestibule. So it was like a mini convention. It was like a 12-hour mini convention that I could run stuff in. And I'm an AD&D guy, and I never lacked for people that wanted to come and play AD&D. It was always a lot of fun, but sadly that's not the case. But definitely check out Gods and Monsters, and Tracy knows all about it too, because that's Tracy and I. We knew each other before then because I stalked Tracy online, and but we met face to face at Gods and Monsters. It's a wonderful place. You should definitely check it out.
And they have a bar.
They have a bar. Vault 5421.
I was telling them all about the bar, because I'm all about the booze.
And that's that shop is partly owned by Neil Gaiman. So
yes, that's right.
Man fans out there.
Which just blows my mind. It's like I'll see like Neil Gaiman in the news, and I'm like, I'm friends with the lady who's friends with him.
Right.
So, so you've done a signing there, though. You guys had the comics down there. Was that for Hardly Heroes, or was it all your titles, or what was that all about?
Yep, those for Hardly Heroes. Yeah, we it's kind of a weird environment to do a signing, just because if you're out in the vestibule, like you've got just people coming in and out off of iDrive. So it was funny. We had this one interaction with this kid who he came to us and was like, "Oh, you guys do D&D?" And we're trying to explain to him. I think there was a language barrier there, but they have Orlando. There's like a huge Brazilian community.
Yeah.
But I was like, "Yeah, we have like a D&D comic or whatever." And so he went in, and I think he got like the 5th edition starter set. I think it was either like the beginners, the like very beginners.
Yeah,
pack that you
their
get.
5e starter set. Yeah.
Yeah, or it was like the Rick and Morty one. It was one of those two. And he came out and he was like, "Can you sign this?" And we're like,
Oh,
like he thought we were like from Wizards, like promoting D&D. And I was like, we should have.
you didn't sign it for him? I would have written my name all over that thing.
Why not?
Bill Sylvie. There you go.
Bad. I was like, well, we didn't make D&D, We have our little thing.
Well,
but he was still excited. So.
Good. Yeah, and I many years ago, many years ago, I worked at the Florida Mall, believe it or not, and yeah, the Brazilian tourist season, man, it's something else. It's something else.
It's crazy. But yeah, so we had a good time. Yeah, I mean, I go down there. There's a handful of shops I go to. I try to hit up when I'm in Orlando. There's that one. There's I guess this is more for comics than games, but that Blackbird Comics and Coffee, they're a really cool spot. They have a little coffee shop. You can get like a good sandwich and coffee, and then hang out there, read back issues, till the day ends. Let's see. There's a newer shop. It's owned by the guy who puts on QuestCon, actually, I guess, which we'll end up talking about later. But I want to say it's the Crafty Gamer.
I know about the Crafty Gamer, and this is such. I did not know he had a store. So I went to QuestCon a couple of takes back. My audience sent me to GaryCon up in Wisconsin, my wife and I. And I thank everybody who helped make that happen. Of course, that was awesome. But we went up to GaryCon. Good evening, Miss Bella. And I'm walking around the vendor floor. It's a beautiful vendor space, and I'm strolling around. And around a corner, and there's a booth. The guy's got a booth going, and I'm looking, and I'm like, I'm collecting cards, because particularly it's like every 5th person is in addition to a vendor, a creator, right? And I love having people on the show as guests. I love having guests on. So I'm like, let's see who might be interested. And I pick up this guy's business card, and it's like, there's the address, Winter Park, Florida. So, I'm all the way up in Wisconsin, and here's the guy who's like 10 minutes from my house, and it was the Crafty Gamer.
Nice.
And then later at the con, I ran into
Carlos.
Yes, thank you. I ran into Carlos from QuestCon, but that was kind of serendipitous. So yeah, I know the Crafty Gamer, and or rather, I know of the Crafty Gamer. Any other favorites around town? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I met Carlos at Gods and Monsters when you and I were signing Lost Crypt modules.
Oh, cool.
Really?
And then Carlos invited me to QuestCon after that. So we're kind of all like interconnected in a sort of a 6 steps from Kevin Bacon sort of way.
Right on. That's
nice.
That's pretty cool. So any other comic game stores around town that you like?
There is one that I'm trying to remember what it used to be called. It was one of the big popular ones there, but it was bought ironically by a guy who owned a shop in Jacksonville. I think Coliseum of Comics ended up buying the one in Jacksonville. So I think he sold it to them, and he bought it and turned it into friendly neighborhood game store, or like friendly local game shop, something like that. And
So,
go ahead. I'm trying to remember what it was called before that.
There's like, it was Sci-Fi City before that.
Sci-Fi City, yes. That
It
shop
was
is pretty sweet.
Enterprise 1701 before then, and when it was called that, it had been in 4 places prior. It was
So
3 places prior. It was here in Longwood. It was then in downtownish Orlando. It was on Mills and 50. And then they moved over just a couple of blocks from the Navy base when it was a Navy base. It's now a subdivision, but and they were huge when they were over there. And then they moved to near where they are now and changed their name to Sci-Fi City. And Sci-Fi City was actually like a 4 or 5 outlet chain, and it was a mega store. And it was gargantuan. And then they shrank down considerably and moved it to where it is now. And of course, now it's called a friendly local game store. But it started life as Enterprise 1701. And a few of my
Sci-Fi City.
Yeah. So there's lots, at least a couple of people in the audience remember when it was Enterprise 1701. So that it's almost like a ship of Theseus, though. It's like how much of the original is still left. Derek served at the Navy base. Yeah,
it's almost a Pokemon level of evolutions.
Yeah,
that store.
Yeah. So it's shrunk and it's shrunk and it's grown. When it was downtown, there were 2 parking spots in front of it. You could either find an unoccupied parking lot blocks away and walk to it, or you could try and get one of the 2 parking spots that was right in front of the store. Death Angels, Sci-Fi City's up in Knoxville. Okay, so yeah, they were part of that.
Interesting.
So, but anyway, yeah, there's been a lot of comic and game stores here in the Orlando area. So to come back to the comic and your collaborations a little bit, Tracy, you actually did some covers for Hardly Heroes, correct?
Yeah. Bryan, if you want to explain the different covers, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. And I'm happy to talk about it because I was scrambling to get the website updated before the stream. So Tracy did the variant cover for our first volume. And then we, slight tweak, but we came out with a QuestCon exclusive cover for this year's QuestCon and used Tracy's cover. So I've got his on the volume and an issue 1 variant now. And so those are for sale, which I could link to you.
Yeah, you could put the link in the private chat. Yeah, it won't display because YouTube ever afraid of spam. So if you put that in the private chat, I can share that and then I can show it to people on the screen here.
Awesome. Can they get the Virgin cover too, Bryan, or is that something different?
I'm glad you asked, Tracy. So they can get the QuestCon exclusive. So on the website, I've got 15 because I want to keep some for myself and Kyle and people. Yeah. But yeah, so they can do a trade. There's a trade variant, which people who are unfamiliar to comics, it's like all the trade dress, the title, and then you've got a Virgin cover, which is like the full art. All the trade stuff is on the back. So some of the collectors, or if you just want to appreciate Tracy's art with none of the noise in front of it, we've got those, and then a bundle. So if you get the trade and the Virgin, you get a little bit of a discount. And they're signed by Tracy and Kyle, the writer, the head writer.
Now I have, I am an enthusiastic Tracy Lesch fan. I mean, I've got the man's artwork up here. So a lovely gift from Tracy and his wife. So guys, if you want some signed Tracy Lesch art, here you go. Let me see here. Let me just kind of click through here.
So that first link was for that QuestCon exclusive, and then this one's going to be for the volume, which I guess at this point, okay, yeah, so I have it right. So there's I think I put like 2 or 3 because we're running a little low on the volumes, but they're also signed by Tracy.
So, okay, and I will. I'm going to drop the direct link for this for you guys here in the chat because I can do that, but apparently my guest can't. But y'all can check that out right there.
Sweet. I didn't know we were up to 20 reviews.
There you go.
I don't tell people to go review, so
some of them should actually be from real people and not Chinese bots.
I hope so, yeah. Otherwise, all of my Chinese bots are getting really lazy. I'm just kidding.
Right.
Gotta put them to work.
I'm just I kid. I tease.
But yeah, so that's the volume. And
yeah.
You can that's the OG issue 1 cover.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think what we are doing is like the first cover A for each volume. So it'll be 6 issue volumes, and then like an 18 issue giant collector's version, like a omnibus collection.
Right on.
But yeah, so then we've got a couple like not safe for work spicy covers that we did.
Yeah, thank you for having the logos where they are.
Yeah, no worries. Otherwise, save you from the YouTube algorithm. From
I have straight up had like classic AD&D art, and back then, this is something I talked to Dave LaForce and Errol Otis both about, and the nude in AD&D art, it was like, you could walk into a bookstore, like not even like hidden inside, but you walk into a bookstore and, there's a book with a cover by Frazetta, right?
Yeah.
A fantasy novel cover, and there's going to be nudity on it and that sort of thing. So it was not a big deal at TSR. It was not a big deal with anybody until, of course, the blue-haired church ladies had their little moral panic, and you had
interesting. That's I'm not surprised. It's interesting that you tied it to like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because I was like, man, that seems like it's pretty modern stigma, but that makes sense that back in the day it was the church ladies with the blue hair.
Well, there was the moral panic around D&D, but I mean, like this.
Right.
This is a postcard, and I'm not sure how well. I'll have to do this for a quick second. Don't worry, guys. I'll put it back up there. But I mean, that's a postcard. Little bit of cheesecake from Darlene, the artist, and that's in the back of the Dungeon Master's Guide. She just redid it and issued a postcard of it. It's a succubus,
Some good old fan service.
And again, they did not have a moral panic over it. I don't understand the modern moral panic over it. I didn't understand the moral panic over it back in the day. So, it doesn't make any sense to me now, and it didn't make any sense to me then. But with that said, YouTube be YouTube.
Right.
Their bot won't pick up that black and white line drawing. It might pick up that.
No. But yeah, it's interesting because now
that I'm thinking, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, looking at the cover now again, I remember too that it's an homage to a what was it? A Stories of Greyhawk novel cover.
Oh yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Let me see if I can pull that up. But yeah, now it's just blue-haired, ugly women who are jealous of attractive women, want to ban attractive women from everything.
Yeah. Careful. Sounds like you've had too much to think.
I have my drinking scotch.
Good man.
But I was just going to crack a Guinness open, and I neglected to. But anyway,
Screaming whiskey.
Is this yours, Tracy?
No.
That is not yours. I'll get to. Let me tell you what the project Tracy and I are working on. I'll get some cheesecake out of Tracy Lesch for you guys.
Sure.
I've already been promised it. So, but I do, kids. So this is volume 1, 6 issues in, and we've got you get signed or not signed.
Yep. And for all the Tracy covers, they're signed. So,
excellent.
But yeah, it's a funny thing in the comic industry, depending on who you talk to in that world, because it's almost like there's like pinup artists, and then there's like quote unquote real comic book people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there's like this idea where you cross a certain line or boundary, and you become like White Widow, you know, or like Lady Death. Maybe not Lady Death as much, but it's like, oh no, yours is just, that's all it is. It's just like TNA, and there's nothing. It's kind of weird. Which like Eastern stuff, they don't give a shit about that. I'm like pretty confident if you go to some of the European comic markets, they don't really give a shit. You know, it's so
yeah. I mean,
there's
you
like
look
this weird
at
American. Yeah.
It's weird American Puritanism. I think I said that right. But anyway, let's to focus back on the art a little bit, or the comic a little bit, I should say. So, are you are you looking at, or do you have like maybe cover prints?
Oh, yeah. So I need to get those on the website, but we do pretty much poster prints of every variant cover we do.
Okay.
So I actually do have the print for that as well.
Okay. And so we can get. Will those be available autographed? I mean, I can get my Tracy Lesch stuff autographed. That's not an issue. It's just the other ones. Can I get those autographed?
TBD. So if you guys,
okay,
if you guys get this, I could throw in a print if you'd like. It would just take it would take a little while longer because I'll have to go get Tracy to sign those. We'll have to meet up again.
So shuck darns.
Yeah, it'll take a little bit of planning, but we can do it. We can make it happen.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, and let me put that other guys. I put links in the convo. So that is the other link, so you guys can go check that out. Let me see. Did I get them both? I feel like I did. Yeah. So if you scroll up a little bit, I'll share them again before we go, and then just the URL itself. But so what else is Shattermare doing comics wise?
So we are, it's funny, like we, you know, for most of the year, we were working on Hardly Heroes, releasing issues, and that was what we were focused on. And then we had a handful of people reach out, and they like what we're doing. So, well, maybe Tracy and I can talk about this in a little bit. We'll see. But
fair enough.
So we had some writers reach out and say, "Hey, we like Hardly Heroes, you know, or would you guys be interested in publishing my story?" And in my head, I'm thinking, "Oh man, that like you want me to publish your stuff? I've just done the one book, you know." Mm-hmm. But it was kind of my dream with starting the publishing company that, you know, eventually we expand and build our catalog and become a full-fledged publisher. So now we've got, let's see, four new titles in development. One, the next one is going to be another fantasy book. It's a little darker fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Mercenary Guild, and so it's a little more traditional fantasy, whereas Hardly Heroes is more tongue in cheek, and there's some winks and nods to the campaign. But Mercenary Guild is, I'd say, a little more traditional fantasy, more like Conan or like Frazetta stuff, but it is based off of his chat-based role-playing group game and all of his characters. So we were pretty excited to get working on that. That's by a guy named William. I actually have the link. We have an email sign up going. I can post that if you want. And
Sure, yeah, please do.
Okay, and if people sign up, basically, if they sign up for the newsletter, if they go on to pre-order the book through whatever crowdfunding thing we do / the website, they'll get like an extra cool collectible Nicole card. She's like the smoking hot female mage.
Right on. That's worth the price of admission right there, as far as I'm.
There you go.
Why not? And then, we won't harass you. So we'll just give you little updates. Say, hey, buddy, why don't you check out Mercenary Guild and Hardly Heroes?
Harass away. We're slowly being taken over by Lake Genevaites. We have Tracy, and now Slycanthrope is crept in. Hello, Slycanthrope. Are Slycanthrope? Are you up there in Lake Geneva? I don't know. He's a semi-regular here. We like Slycanthrope, but anyway, so gosh, this is so like. It's a little pat, but I got to ask you. So, who are your comic influences, art-wise? Other than you don't have to gush too much. We don't need his ego blowing up on us. Mr. Lesch there.
You're too kind.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mix of old school, new school, and or modern, and like Eastern and Western.
Mm-hmm.
When we were looking for artists for Hardly Heroes, I just kind of scoured a bunch of different like Facebook indie artist groups and like Reddit threads and stuff, looking for people's art style that had some fantasy stuff in their portfolio. And I just landed on so if you go to their / or go to themercenaryguild.com, then you'll go to the sign up page. But so I would just look for somebody and found a guy, and I really liked his art, and so I reached out and asked him if he'd be interested. I mean, I'd say, as far as like just in general art that I really like you can't beat like Alex Ross, the realism in his stuff. I mean, that's more superhero than fantasy, like Cape Comics, but that stuff is incredible. So I guess we tried to lean more towards that, like a little grittier. When we were looking for the colorist, same thing. Just kind of, I mean, we ended up getting a ton of sample pages done, but we landed on this person who she just does a really cool kind of like painterly style. So it's a lot of brushstroke kind of colors.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like, it's probably a cop-out answer, but it's nothing specific. It isn't like, oh, I didn't, when I was talking to them, I didn't say I want you to draw like this. It was more like I just liked the style and it hit me on some sort of level. So that's kind of how we came about it. So and then like because we're working with indie people, and they're not like veterans of the industry. They like, our artist has some funny quirks that like we just think are hilarious. Like and people probably don't notice, but when we see them, we're like, some of them are like, we had to go back and do like 10 revisions because it is almost like Rob Liefeld kind of stuff, where it's like, bro, you got to go back and fix his hands. His hands are really like, what is happening?
Oh my lord!
Do that.
yeah, some stuff like that. Where like,
you're
just
killing my soul.
Yeah. So there's
People only have 32 teeth and they don't all show at the same time. Please fix.
Right. Well, there's one thing that happened that we thought was hilarious, so we just went with it. It was like he was drawing Theron, the elf character, like the archer assassin rogue. And for some reason, like as the book kept going, and like when he was emoting in certain panels, his ears would just like go flat, and then they would get like longer and longer and longer. Like the whole panel was like ear like from panel side to side, and then his head in the middle, and we were just like, that's hilarious. Just keep doing that. Like we weren't planning that at all. But yeah, exactly. The first time we looked at it, we were very confused, and we're like, what sources are like references are you looking at this for this? But then we're like, oh, it's hilarious. Keep that, So there's some stuff like that.
Sometimes stuff will just kind of come out like that. I mean, I couldn't draw a stick figure, right? I mean, you want to get some laughs, tune into our Monday night AD&D game when the party asked me to sketch something. Like, I don't understand this. Can you kind of draw it? Fine. And I'll open up MS Paint and then comedy ensues. But so I try to be as sensitive as I can to discuss when it comes to discussing art with artists, and that's what Tracy and I have worked together. And I never, I think the merch that we have merch, by the way, audience. Yeah. You guys can winter is coming. Get yourself hoodies. Get yourself a nice hoodie.
Nice.
The holidays are coming. Gifts. You get a nice pint glass with our logo on it there. The merch link is in the description below. But
I have a story, speaking of merch, at some point.
Sure. But no, I asked, there was a particular thing that I wanted done, and I just want this cartoony, silly thing of a bunch of dead adventurers in a dungeon hall, and underneath it says Gary made me do it, in reference to Gary Gygax, So the Delver's Dungeon, Gary made me do it, and I figure I was going to get just that. And then Tracy does this fantastic, just this, gorgeous tribute to his original dungeon board game artwork. And I'm just like, that is so much more than I ever expected or hoped for. I just figured it'd just be this black and white pen and ink deal. And it's this gorgeous 4-color thing that you want to take back to 1978 and hang in your room and shine a black light on. And I love every part of it, and
homage
too. Yes, it is an amazing homage, and I friggin' I love the thing. But that's one of those happy circumstances, you're thinking A and you get B. There's kind of a funny story about the opposite about that. And Tracy, I don't your interactions with Gary was just kind of draw it like this, and then he gave you a thumbs up, and then you just moved on to the next thing. But Larry Elmore, we've all seen the iconic cover of the fighter facing the red dragon. It was used on later versions of basic D&D, and they recycled it for 4E Essentials. But Larry Elmore was tasked with creating a dungeon scene where someone was fighting a dragon for a new revision of basic D&D. And so he did the initial drawing for the art and sent it through the process, and it just came back with no written on it. Or I don't know if it's a post-it note, but just a note on it said no. And so he changed a few things about the composition. It's the classic, if you look at the drawing, it's, the classic triangular, Tracy knows what I'm talking about, you compose things in kind of that shape. And so, he kind of rearranges a few things, cleans up some stuff, sends it back through, comes back, no. And this is a larger note, and it's circled.
Wow.
And so he grabs it up and he goes stomping down to Gary's office. And he's just going to go in there, and his secretary's like, wait, where are you going? And he's like, I'm going to talk to Gary. And she looked at him and said, and you are? Oh. Said, I'm Larry Elmore. I work in the art department. And he can see Gary's boots up on the desk, he's got his feet crossed up. And Gary says, what's going on out there? And he's like, what is this? What do you mean, no? And so he takes it in there, and he's like, oh, I just want one fight. I don't want a whole party of adventurers. I just want one guy fighting the dragon.
Wow.
So we have the
remember
iconic drawing of the lone fighter fighting the red dragon in later versions of ACD. But it used to be, the intent was that it was going to be a whole party of adventurers. And Gary just wanted the one adventurer. But he didn't communicate that. He just kept putting a note on it. No.
Wow.
I think if you guys haven't seen I think it's called like Eye of the Beholder.
Yes.
It's on Amazon Prime. I think they talk about that with Larry and they, oh man, it's so great. I recommend that if people haven't seen it. That's kind of how I learned about that era of D&D and art in the TSR era.
Well, I implore you, get a copy of Art and Arcana also.
Oh yeah.
Get the full box set, because you get Tracy's copy of Tomb of Horrors in it. It actually has a dungeon module you can play in the book. I'm not going to take it down because it would knock a ton of stuff over, but dude, it's $60 well spent. That's just my opinion.
As a side note, the new Lore and Legends book that I am in, the new one, that covers like the history of like Tomb of Horrors, from what I can see in there.
Well, I clearly have something that I want to ask Santa for this year.
Yeah, because they even show an evolution from the drawings that I presented to Gary to like 2, 3, or 4 iterations down the road, by the artists that came after. And it's really kind of fascinating. I haven't had a chance to read the whole book. I just kind of went to the index and kind of sought out my pages to see what was there. But yeah, it looks like a pretty cool book.
14 drawings in 28 days, was it, for Tomb of Horrors, Trace? Or 28 drawings in 14 days? I don't remember.
It was the latter, I believe. Many drawings and not any time to do it in.
Many drawings and not any time to do it. Yeah. So Bryan, with regard to the comic, tell me a little bit about the editing process. Now, anybody out there in the audience, myself, Tracy, of course, you know how D&D sessions can go, right? Sometimes, and I kid my Monday group about this, sometimes the A in AD&D stands for accounting. And I think if you published an issue where everybody just kind of sat around the tavern wondering if they had become more powerful and counting up their gold and seeing what they were going to sell to the merchants and that sort of thing, it probably wouldn't be a big seller that month. You might not get great feedback in the letters to the editor for the next month. So when you concatenate your stories for the comic, do you do a lot of editing to it, or is it literally just like you pick up the big pan of gamer juice and just pour it out on the page? How does that work?
Sure. So for the accounting stuff, and for my group, it tends to be like I don't go shopping in real life nearly as much as I am excited to do fantasy shopping in a town,
right on.
Like with magic items, Like I guess I play more dress up with like magic robes and armor and stuff in D&D. So we go on a lot of shopping sprees, especially when we hit a new town and we get like a pile of loot or whatever. But I would say most of those are handled through the power of montages. So like if it's like there's a lot of back and forth, because in the peninsula where the story takes place, they do kind of bounce back and forth from like a handful of town/cities, little hamlets. So that's pretty much condensed, unless there was like a fun, like you have random encounters on the road to break up just the monotony of travel, because most people don't want to like role play, like however many hours it would take to travel on foot from one town to another. Unless you do, maybe that's your group. But So we try to condense some of that. But
you need a montage,
right. Yeah. So like issue 3 kind of 4 is an example of that. So like they get to town and they kind of stumble onto like the first like the first breadcrumbs of the bigger mystery and the plot and the conspiracy that's going on. And so there's just like a montage of them like talking to different families. So without giving too many spoilers, like they show up to this town after doing their initial quest and or attempting to. And so people tell them about like these kids that are cursed somehow. They have some kind of affliction or whatever. And so they just go like talk to the families, But in a D&D session, that could be like a whole session of just, I want to interrogate or question or, ask random family members like, oh, what, sometimes you have people who are very detailed in the group. Sometimes it boils down to, make a gather information check or investigation or whatever. So that's kind of what we do there. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty true. I think so far an issue has almost lined up to like a session, which I have to credit Kyle because he's really good. I mean, he's gotten down writing a script for a comic issue down to like an art. It's like a science now. In the beginning, none of us were really familiar with it, so we just had to figure it out. But yeah, now it's pretty good. So he kind of knows like where the main beats are going to be for the overarching, the story for campaign 1. He kind of knows like where to leave it at the end of a volume, an issue, how to pace the issue out. So I got to give him a lot of credit for that. So my job has been like becoming exponentially easier, as far as like an editor producer.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that. So, and now we have a story editor as well to help. So that's cool because he has a more neutral approach. He is as invested in the the characters and the story as much as we are, because there are characters, we literally played them. So like it's good to get input from people who are just reading it as like, is this an entertaining read? So that's kind of the evolution.
The funny thing is, it's the same thing I do with the character from our Monday night game, the thief that I play, and our adventures in the game inspire me to do pieces of art with my character and the situations that he's encountered. So it's sort of very much parallel to what you're talking about. Only I'm not like putting it in a comic book form. I'm just giving you, a snapshot of one of the adventures. But either way, I think it's, to me, it's very cool.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. It's very inspiring to get to, I don't know, like you said, give Tracy some art to work on for characters. Like Tracy, it's nice. I'm jealous of you because I can't draw to save my life either. So you can just draw it. And you're like, oh, this was great. I'm just going to put this, I'm just going to show the world what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, my stuff is locked up in my head. It's like I said, the party's like, okay, describe this, or show us a picture. Cause I'm like, you're going to get stick figures and then not to scale written in the pen tool in MS Paint. And it's again, comedy ensues. So it's like somebody that can play guitar, it's like the mood just takes them and they break out their guitar and start playing. And I'm just like, oh, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, you're like, give me 2 weeks. I got to call Tracy and then I'll give you a great version of it.
But, so it's, you talk about story editing and that sort of thing. And a D&D game, typically speaking, and this is where I get my old man pants on and I start talking about, let me get my get my wizard hat on here, and I start talking about actual, what I consider real D&D, that is not like, well, I, the DM, have a story. I'm telling a story. You're all participating in a story. And, you will go down this path and do not stray from the path because I'm telling a story, you see. Versus you step out of the keep. There's a road that winds down to the trade routes. There's the dark forest. There's the haunted dungeon. There's the mountains of terror. Go do what you want. And we'll roll some dice and see who survives. I tend to lean into that a little bit more than I have this grand story. So as an editor of comics, and you're bringing in a story, or you're bringing in your tabletop sessions into a format where people are very much concerned with the Bildungsroman, the story journey, because all great journeys are story journeys, right?
Right.
But how do those two? Is there a point of divergence in tabletop time where you look at what you've got to edit and say, well, for the sake of a readable comic, we're going to do this, even though that didn't happen at the table?
Yeah, part of that is we have the luxury of being so far in the campaign. It's not like we're writing it and then next week we have a session, right? So when we sat down, and this was important for me too, because again, I joined like the tail end of campaign 1, the beginning of campaign 2. So for the first entire arc, I had Kyle sit down and just outline everything. So we just went from a basic story structure. I think we ended up coming up with like 5 acts instead of 3 acts, but we just broke everything down from like the very basic high level story beats of when they meet, intro, when they get to they start building their relationships, they go on some quests, they almost like a power level was like a not necessarily the climax of the story. Like the power level was kind of something to keep in mind. But then, the typical journey, the climax, the low point, the resolution. So we went through all of that. And so we have a very detailed outline of like exactly where, we plan to go. So the rest is kind of just filling it in, and that's our guide. Like that's our Bible to the book. So as we go through issues, if there's something that's I don't know, that I guess is like redundant or unnecessary, that we can go in and say, okay, well, maybe they spent a couple issues here and then kind of move along, instead of like if they really spent like 4 sessions, doing something. I'm trying to think in my mind of like a specific section. So it's almost like arcs.
Right. Well, let's just address the owl bear in the room if we can. Things happen to adventurers.
Right.
TPKs, deaths, failed saving throws that result in things that the DM finds hilarious and the players exponentially less so. When you're writing something again that goes to an arc, you're building up to a point. Again, I'm a very dice falls where it may kind of guy. Ask Tracy. Poor Endora, she will be missed. But
lost the love of my life.
You're breaking my heart, Tracy. But so Bryan, you've got your arc going, and you sit down Tuesday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, whenever you do it. Everybody everybody fails their death saves.
Right.
It's just how do you maintain the verisimilitude of a comic, or rather of a game, and yet continue the comic under circumstances like that?
Yeah,
Good
I
question.
mean, I think that introduces a natural something that a lot of stories don't do, which is you have writers that are afraid to kill their characters off, because they just grow too attached. So I think D&D, a campaign, literally, it really lends itself to building in more suspense for the main characters. Because when you're playing a D&D campaign, like you say, you're not sure if you could get totally wiped out because your party makes a cocky decision, right? Or they bite off a little more than they can chew on an adventure or a dungeon or whatnot. And maybe you have a TPK, maybe you lose 2 or 3 people and they don't make it out, and new people join the group, and people come in and out of the story. So I think that actually lends itself to pretty good storytelling, because you can, in a lot of mediums, you can kind of tell when characters almost outlive their stay, or like writers will come up with some contrived way to keep them in, instead of a situation that would actually be much better for the drama. I think there are probably situations where at some point it'll be a little more dramatic. So maybe like a character dies in a melodramatic way, but in the comic we try to give him a little better death, than just like, oh well, he rolled his save and fell in a spike pit and died.
Right.
So something like that. But like in issue 2, there's a thing, I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, right out the gate, something happens to an NPC. I mean, that kind of, to me, lends itself to the tongue-in-cheek of, okay, well, this is based on a D&D campaign. So people who are used to playing D&D will appreciate it, because they'll know, oh man, that guy probably just failed his deck save. Like that guy, got roasted, or that guy failed a disguise check. So that's kind of where the humor comes in, I'd say. Like, not literally breaking the fourth wall, but you get the idea, from a D&D perspective. So I will say one of the challenges, actually, I've talked about this before, but one of the challenges, actually, there's like a different level of metagaming. So like, Tracy, imagine that you had to do art for your campaigns. Like, you were on a schedule and you had to do art. So imagine a scenario where you're like worried about, so I mean, chat, you're probably familiar watching the show with metagaming, right? You're playing your character and you're like, well, I don't want my knowledge as a player influencing my character's decisions. But there's another level of that where it's like, I know eventually the comic will get here, so I don't want the comic to influence my decision as a player, influencing my decision as a character playing this game, and thinking, oh man, maybe if I just do this and this and slightly guide the game in a certain direction, then it would come up with something cool for the comic. So so that's kind of like that. If you had to draw something for your characters every week or month or whatever, you'd have the temptation to go, well, I'll just do this, because the snapshot of what I'm drawing would be really awesome if this happened, right? So that's something interesting that I never expected to happen, but has creeped up. But then there are times where, like, oh man, that'll be really great when the comic gets there in like 10 years or however long.
Right. So. Yeah, that's and I, that's like a stage of creativity that I never want to see. And I my audience knows that I go on about this, as we do a live stream most of the time on Tuesday nights. We live stream an AD&D game, and I tell them, look, hey, 10 minutes from now, after this game starts, there could be a total party kill, and the rest of tonight is them rolling up new characters. That's That's just how it is. I don't know what the dice are going to do. They don't know what the dice are going to do. I know what the dungeon's like, and that's about all I can say. I know what the dungeon and the environment's like. We don't have character sessions between shows. We don't have a writer's room where we discuss what's going to happen, because I would rather have 30 people watching and my own little obscure corner of the internet knowing that I was actually playing Dungeons and Dragons versus millions of people watching and knowing that I was not actually playing in Dungeons and Dragons, like other endeavors
Right.
I
where
could
it's more
mention.
just like a theater act. Yeah. It's less
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say one of the nice things about how Wilson, the original DM, kind of crafted it, and how Josh, who's one of the players, picked it up, is they have a good like an inherent sense of storytelling, and so the story kind of lends itself naturally. Like I can't think of situations off the top of my head where it doesn't completely derail. Because again, when we put the whole outline together, I mean, I read through I had to read through all of it just so I knew exactly what was happening in the first arc. But it kind of worked out where you don't have something really crazy happen to derail the whole story. Where, like you say, like, well, it's the dice roll. But there are times I would say, I will say, almost in the style of Game of Thrones, a lot of the bad things that happen to the characters are the characters' fault. like the players played them a little chaotic, and it's like some situations could have been avoided, but they just stepped right into it.
Yeah.
It's a little, yeah, it's more of a situation where as a DM you're like, are you sure you want to make that roll? And they're like, yeah, why not? Or we're like, yeah, of course, what could go wrong?
When you've murdered your son's girlfriend and he draws down on you and you're sitting on the crapper and he's got a crossbow pointed at your chest, don't smart off to him and tell him to put that thing down.
Right.
Because you're going to,
Right. And you've shit on this guy for most of his life. He's the black sheep of the family. People literally called him a monster. So you probably don't want to taunt him right now.
Yeah, exactly.
In a chaotic time, especially when he knows, or he put together what you've been doing with, I guess, the second woman he loved. I guess they don't really go into his backstory a whole lot in the show, but
yeah,
we'll just say the woman he loves. Yeah, exactly. So I will say the things that happen to the characters have probably more or less happened from player and character decisions. So it does kind of lines up more to traditional story than I guess some of the shenanigans that happen in a D&D campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot of the same funny shenanigans. Like there's a lot of party and fighting. Everyone's a dysfunctional family, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of,
we don't know anything about that.
Right. So there's a lot of, you can tell that this guy, like in issue 2, is it? Yeah, it's 2. One of the main characters just splits off from the party, and so here's an example of how Kyle handled that. So one of the characters, the main party member, he splits off from the party because in the actual D&D campaign, the player just decided to split the party. He was just like, well, I'm just going to go to this town and investigate. And everyone else is like, well, no, we clearly have to guide this guy to the town or whatever. And he's like, no, I don't care. I'm going to go over here. Maybe I'll meet back up with you guys or whatnot. And so that was kind of just like a hard cut to this guy's mini adventure in the issue. And then he meets back up, with the party. So.
Yeah.
So the writer does a pretty good job of handling that, so it's not really awkward, because that could be really awkward a situation like that.
Right on. We've got a few questions here stacked up, but the Dying Breed actually kind of I'm going to spin off of his, and then we're going to get to some of y'all's questions, which I've got marked. Fear not, Bryan. How did you find yourself in this business?
In publishing?
Yeah, in publishing, specifically what you're doing with Shattermare, but also just publishing in general.
It's kind of a culmination of several things. So my background is like finance, accounting, sales, marketing, that kind of stuff. I went to school for, actually funny that you mentioned guitar. I went to school for music business and accounting business. And in the music side, I went for like the production side. So like production, same thing, business side, learned a lot about intellectual property law and publishing, just for music. And I tried to start a couple of other companies. They just, fell through for different reasons, like people move away after college and stuff. But so, and that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier when we were all talking and talking about making this a comic book. I had kind of already wanted to start a publishing company just through various endeavors that I've been working on. And I have the business background. So to me, it's not like a giant mountain to climb, where a lot of people are much more creative and they're very talented at what they do, but they just don't have the business acumen just because they spend so much time, developing like the crucial skills they need to make their art. So that came more natural to me. So when we started Shattermare, we started the publishing company to publish Hardly Heroes because aside from Gabe, even though he was a big comic fan, like none of us had experience in the industry. So it was just natural. Like, okay, we're going to have to do all of this on our own. Like I don't have a bunch of connections with people at like Image or Marvel or DC or whatever. I don't know a lot of people. I didn't even know that there were like what kind of printers were available for books. So pretty much everything that we had to figure out, we did. And we're a small team, so it's not impossible. It's just a matter of making phone calls and doing it. So some of it seems like luck, just pure luck. Like I happen to get to know a guy who's a good friend of mine now who owns a printing business in Jacksonville. And he happens to have all the equipment we needed to print a comic book. So I didn't have to I didn't get caught in the trap that a lot of people do when they do self-publishing, which is oh yeah, the smoke detector. Yeah, well, it's not that I don't know about it. It's just we're not staying in it's fine. I can go into that later. Trust me, it bothers me as much as it bothers you. But
I won't mark that one for asking because you saw it already. So
yeah, but so yeah, the publishing thing to me is kind of something I'd been building to or wanted to do anyways. So this to me is just a lot of fun, and getting to work with creative people that like Tracy and our writer and all the other artists we work with is fun. Yeah, and I mean, the plan is to also do, like, I'm working with a buddy, so one of the writers and one of my friends, their sons. So one of them, he's into animation. So we're working sort of, I don't know if I want to call it a pilot. It's still in development, but we're working on doing like a motion comic for Hardly Heroes, for instance. One of the other guys, we're working on soundtrack for the motion comic. So, naturally, we'll be publishing music. Once we have the soundtrack and we could put like an album together for the soundtrack for the motion comic. So that's just fun stuff I like to do, and I know a little bit about it. So
Right on.
I've got Watchmen, the motion comic, and that thing is just a masterpiece. Like,
oh yeah,
like you said, it's got the music, it's got the animation. If you've never seen it, anybody out there, I recommend get Watchmen, the motion comic. It's amazing, and it'll demonstrate what Brian's talking about.
yeah, highly recommend. That's a big inspiration for what we're working on. Yeah, and it's got incredible voice acting, good soundtrack. So
Excellent. So I guess a little bit of a follow up to that, and this kind of gets into into kind of a broad view. But as a publisher, well, first, as fans, I mean, you cannot swing a dead cat on YouTube without hitting a video by comic fans who will tell you in a heartbeat for clicks that Marvel and DC are imploding and they're going to collapse any day now. They're dead in the water. They're ruined. Disney has ruined them. They've ruined themselves. And I mean, numbers are numbers. Like, when I was a kid, a so-so, but I remember there was a comic run from, it was in the very early 80s from Marvel that was about it was literally just a truck driver.
Wow.
It ran for about a year, and they tried to keep it afloat by occasionally having guest appearances from Captain America or the Hulk or whatever. But there was enough of an interest in it that Marvel said, yeah, we should put this out. And it sold enough month to month that it lasted for 12 issues. And I mean, at that time, if your comic didn't do 150K books in a month, you were done. It's
right.
Like you fumbled the ball. Something you drew, something you wrote, something you edited didn't work for this. So I'm sorry, we're not. We're going to have to cut you off after 12 issues. And now, if a book sells 50,000, a Marvel main comic, X-Men, Spider-Man, what have you, if it sells 50K issues, that is a huge deal.
Oh, yeah.
That is like, oh my God, stop the press. No, keep the presses running.
Right.
But from a professional point of view, do you think comics are collapsing, or do you think they're just kind of evening out? What's your take?
I think that, like you said, the big publishers are imploding. And it's mostly, what the saddest thing is? It's really their own fault. Like it couldn't have happened to better companies, in my opinion, because
Agreed.
There's circles of comic creators going around on YouTube, the indie scene. A lot of us are calling it the Iron Age. It's kind of how I would. So you had the bronze, silver, golden age of comics, right? And now that it's falling like the Roman Empire of the comic industry. So now that, we're in the Iron Age, so we're rebuilding because it's inevitable. Like it's inevitable to me that all of these companies, and the reason I say that it's their own doing is because if you look at manga, which is just Eastern comics to me, there's some structural differences, art styles, etc. But at the end of the day, it's a graphic novel, right? It's got images and they're putting word balloons, bubbles, whatever you want to call it. And manga is completely destroying the Western comic industry. I mean, what should be the Western comic industry's key demographic? Like 12 to like 60, like 12-year-old boys, 13-year-old boys, around to like 60-year-old men. They've completely lost, like they've completely alienated. So they're like they've lost a whole generation, multiple generations of people at this point. Like, how do you come back from that? I mean,
And the people that they've chased don't buy comics.
no, they don't.
They
don't have money.
Yeah,
right.
They're losers.
Right.
Absolutely right. And to be certain, I mean, like Tracy did stuff with Marvel. And you can back me up on this, Trace. I don't think I'm out of line. But that Marvel Comics that you worked with when you did is a completely different animal than what is stumbling to its dying grave now.
Yeah, and it's sad to watch too, but the more you shout about it, the more the other side comes at you and says, "Oh, you're just, you're a conspiracy nut, and you don't know what hell you're talking about." When it's like, "Hey, I'm not the one out there celebrating, oh, we sold 20,000 issues. Look at us."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, in the shadow of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, you just look pathetic. Because in the heyday, most all of Marvel's books were doing 100K or better. So don't come at me with that.
Well, and you see like a YouTuber named Eric July come around with the Rippaverse and sell like 30,000, 50,000 copies on his second volume or whatever, and he's just blowing them out of the water. Yeah, and they're stoked to get like 10,000 sales on a Batman book. So it's just the market's there. It's so
they hate Eric Rippa.
Oh yeah, they hate him. And he couldn't be the perfect poster child for indie comics because he's everything that they would promote if he shared their politics and their weird like cult like mentality, So it's even funnier just like to watch them freak out. But I guess I understand if I put myself in their shoes, like it's security at the end of the day. It's like job security for them, and these are people that probably couldn't get a job at like a Starbucks,
right?
Like much less.
What kills me is what started in 2014 and then started happening to comics in 2016. But when it started in 2014, when the culture war started in 2014, I told my fellow tabletop fans, I said, look, they're coming for us.
Yeah.
I see what they're doing to comic books. I see what they're doing to video games. Guys, they're coming for us. And my fellow gamers, by and large, said, no, that you're bonkers. Just ignore them. Just ignore them. Just play AD&D and just ignore them. It won't matter. What are they going to do? Tear Gary Gygax's legacy down, Bill? Come on. Here we are.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the ashes, you've got guys like Eric July. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Well, hopefully he'll be back. Because we have questions, but while he's gone, Tracy, you got some questions here. I'll keep my eyes on. Bob Gnarly says, that's the artist Tracy, like Roper Tracy? I think we know the answer to that. And yes, Bob says, you rock. Thank you for your creations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Vaughn asked this, and I swear we've had this discussion before, Vaughn, but he says, any opinions on the D&D book, The Affiliate? That was like ages after you worked at TSR, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the creature had morphed into something almost unrecognizable to me at that point, so I didn't really pay attention. As soon as they started bringing in the whole theory about ethelids and interplanetary monsters and stuff like that, I was like, yeah, okay, you can miss me with that.
So there you go. Thoughts and opinions on that, Vaughn. Welcome back, Brian.
Sorry about that. Again,
that's okay.
Temporary stuff.
Your house is not burning down, is it? I hope.
Yeah, there's not like a fire happening right now.
He's like, I gotta go dump some water on it. I'll be right back.
I'll be right back. I had to go grab a bucket. No, it's like temporary situation. It's getting ready to rent my house, move.
Right on.
Just got to deal with it. But
So from
anyways,
Dying Breed,
sorry about
and I'll ask this also of you, Bryan, but Tracy, how and when did you get into art, and were your
Okay.
parents supportive?
In a nutshell, how and when did I get into art? From when I could first pick up a pen. Um, when I was a kid, the Batman show hit, and it hit hard. Batmania was everywhere. As a kid, it caught me. You know, I bought the merch, I watched the show, and spent my time replicating what I was seeing on screen on paper. You know, draw Batman, draw his villains, draw his vehicles, and then I got into comics. You know, when I got an allowance, I would walk down to the local grocery store, and I'd go to the comic vending machine they had in the lobby. Yeah, comics that came out of a vending machine, and
Mm-hmm.
I would, and I would look at my money and try to figure out of all the wonderful titles that were there for 12 cents a piece,
oh
which
man,
ones could I afford to walk away with? Am I going to pick the Batman, or am I going to get the Captain America? I had to make these monumental decisions with what little money I had. But from then on, it's like I collected comics. I kept pretty much most everything that I bought. I still have like 36 long boxes of stuff uh, in my house. So, but yeah, comics were a big influence on me art wise. Just getting into all that, and then moving into other things as time went on. Techniques and uh, more fantasy stuff, like the piece that is behind Bill up on a shelf there. I did that in 1979, so I was still in high school when I did that, and that was like me doing watercolor and showing the D&D folks that I could actually do color work if they needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as my parents being supportive, well, my dad was a commercial artist at one time, so I was kind of always under his tutelage. Um, but even so, I could have even used more input from my dad. But yeah, they were supportive. My mom wasn't so much, she didn't understand the geek stuff so much, but my dad knew where I was coming from, and we shared a lot of that, a lot of love of fantasy and sci-fi, and great moments around the TV watching Star Trek and things like that together. Um, but yeah, comics art-wise were a big influence on me, and I developed my heroes from there: Jack Kirby, Jim Steranko, Neil Adams, Bernie Wrightson, Mike Plug, John Buscema, John Romita, and then later John Romita Jr. I love his art. Um, but yeah, those were my influences, and they kind of drove me into art. Once I got into art, then I sort of branched out and experimented and got into different things, and then eventually crossed Gary's path.
Right on. And of course, we know that story. So Bryan, how about your family? When you said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and I'm gonna publish comic books," was that did that create some interesting talk around the Thanksgiving table?
Not really. Yeah, my parents are pretty supportive, and I mean, at this
Excellent.
point, I, you know, I can do it. I do what I want. So, like, but yeah, I mean, they seem to be pretty proud of me. I'm all they got. I'm an only child, So,
Right on.
uh,
Right
but
on.
yeah, I mean, they're happy that I'm doing something I'm passionate about, and one day it'll be nice to 100% work for myself and get out of corporate America and be doing something I'm passionate about. So making
Excellent.
money while doing it.
Hey, just real quick, Tracy, I think I found your vending machine, bud.
Yeah.
That's it.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. And the comics, see you got the place where you put in the coin, and then you've got the knob where you pull it out and get the comic, and the comics were coated with like a cornstarchy or talcum powder layer, so that they wouldn't stick together. And so down at the bottom there, when you get your comic, you'd take it out of the bin and you'd kind of blow it off because it had this like talcum powder on it.
Nice.
I've got to get one of those.
Right. I was a spinning rack at 7-Eleven guy. The bronze spinning racks. That was me. So let's see.
Hey kids, comics.
Hey kids, comics. Absolutely. So I hope that answers your question there, Dying Breed. I'm gonna bounce this one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I will say, when I was going to college, I did have my parents had a very stern talk with me about what I was going to go to school and major in. So there was a conversation of, and it was specifically personal because my dad had been in music. He had a music shop. They ended up closing it. So when I told them, hey, I want to go to school for music, they're like, no, we're not helping you. Then you need to go to school and get a degree that you can get a job in that is more stable, I guess is the best way to put it. That's putting it more generously than what they did. So I said, okay, fine, I'll go to school for business and music. And so I just did 2 majors. So but yeah, other than that, they were fine with it.
Right on. Let's see. So you started with 3rd edition, Bryan, but you said you'd like to play some classic D&D? For
sure.
Yeah, that's well, be careful what you wish for. Mm-hmm. I like to say, be careful what you wish for.
Sounds like we should plan a day.
Perhaps we can do that, my friend. Perhaps
I'll make sure the fire alarm isn't going off, and I don't have intermittent connection issues.
It's just we can make it
the torch sets off the fire alarm in the dungeon.
A fire alarm just is it's the ambiance. It's just call it the magic user alarm. So Tracy, what is Clark wants to know? What is your favorite edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and do you still play that? I know the answer, but I'm going to let Tracy say it anyway.
1st edition, AD&D.
Well, there you go, and he plays
AD&D,
it.
That's for me.
Right on. So, any other properties you thinking? I mean, obviously, everybody wants to hit it big, right? Everybody wants to say yes. We're going to do this, this, and this. But anything on tap for the comics as you go forward? The Hardly Heroes characters. You said you'd like to publish the adventures. Anything beyond that, or are you just kind of looking at the next set of downs, as it were, to go a little football on you?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, once we get the module into a either working title, like a beta test version, or just a no art, like a bare bones kind of Unearthed Arcana version, I'm actually going to release that on Drive-Thru RPG. Is one of the places we're going to host that. So people will be able to pick that up in like mid to late November. I just have to double check if on Drive-Thru they can, because the way I want to set it up is functionally it's going to be the module for the first volume, but almost like a crowdfunding. So if they buy it, like I was toying around whether I want to do the free or the pay what you want. It's going to have some sort of price tag, but if you buy it, you'll get the full digital version. That's my plan. So I just have to figure out what the best way to do that is. Whether that's like replace it with the updated version, contact drive-through and just say, hey, can I reach out to these people in email, and just message them and say, hey, once the full version comes out. But anyways, we're working on the module. So we'll have that ready soon. And then Tracy and I will start talking art for that. So that'll be fun.
Excellent.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, Mercenary Guild, one of the other titles we're working on is going to be our first manga, like full-fledged from back to front. We're working on that. That's Kyle's second story. He just finished up the first volume of that, so we're going to go into editing soon. We've got a couple titles, like I mentioned earlier, in the works. Like these are all new IP. They're not tied into Hardly Heroes. It's probably just not worth mentioning them now because it's so early on. So that's kind of the plan. Planning for next year, the shows that we're going to do, that kind of stuff. But yeah, other than that, chugging along. We're coming out with issue 9 of Hardly Heroes pretty soon. So people can look out for that. I think that's everything.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So sounds like you've got a pretty full plate going into 2024. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw that URL because, my goodness, we are coming up on 2 hours here. And I know some of you folks might like to take a break. So I'm going to put that up there. You folks, please do check out Shattermare Comics and see what they've got to offer. They're bringing the Tracy Lesch. They're bringing the D&D adventures to your comic reading pitties, and you should absolutely check them out. Any closing thoughts, Bryan?
Tracy, do you want to talk about something that we're talking about, collaborating on, working on, or do you think it's too early?
We talked about a couple. Are you talking about the book, or are you talking about the Lich?
No, the Paladin.
Oh, okay. We are planning to turn my fantasy novel, Armor of God the Paladin, into a graphic novel format. So I'm going to adapt the book into that with, the most beautiful art I can drum up. And
that sounds fantastic. That is hype. I am. Let me see. Let me copy.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first, guys. So we have talked about this before. There's the link to Armor of God in the chat. So you guys can go check that out. That is Tracy's fantasy novel, and looks like we're getting a graphic novel out of it too. That sounds really awesome. So you guys keep your eyes out for that. And when all this stuff starts to roll in, you guys have got to come back. We've got to have more Shattermare comics and more Tracy Lesch on this live stream. Will you do that? Will you commit to that?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Always.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank everyone in the audience for hanging out with us this evening. Of course, our guests, Bryan, Tracy, thank you so much for being here this evening. We'll be back tomorrow night with some kind of live stream tabletop role-playing game. I know it's nominally Gamma World that we do on Friday evenings, but this week it's probably going to be 1E, unless the 1E gang just can't get together. And then you're just going to have to stare at me awkwardly for an hour, and I'll just sit here in stoic silence and make it really weird on everybody. We'll do that. I'll find something to talk about. But again, thank you so much to Bryan. Thank you so much to Tracy for being here.
You're welcome, and love you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You too, Tracy, and we'll talk to you real soon. In the interim, though, I do want to warn everyone, it is that season, and you know what season it is, so do please keep your eyes peeled for the dreaded owl bears. Peace. Love you all. See you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.